Hello, this is Bill Iyall, Chairman of the Cowlitz Indian Tribe from 2008 to 2020. In about 2012, I was at the National Congress of American Indians. It might have been 2013. It was 13 in Sacramento. And up till that time, the tribes were having great difficulty with the Treasury Department and specifically the IRS. The IRS was moving across the country auditing tribes and gaming tribes and just basically all tribes. And President Obama had issued an executive order for consultation. Consultation means that if a agency wants to make a regulation that affects tribes or any action that affects tribes, they must go to the tribes and consult. Well, IRS told many tribes, kind of a sad story, but they said, we could not consult with you because we're investigating you. Almost in those words. What a horrific way for a federal agency that has trust responsibility to protect the interests of the tribes to act. And so eventually we went to, I was at 8 White House conferences, 8 different years. And at one of those, we raised the issue with the highest levels of the administration. And eventually they brought forward a tribal liaison to consult with the tribes. And that was an important turning point, but still, there was a major issue at the Sacramento consultation session, and for some reason I was the only tribal chairman in the room. There was like 50 other folks there, but the IRS was taxing the timber per caps for Warm Springs and Yakima. And I was there with the lead attorney for Warm Springs, Howie Arnett, great guy. The Warm Springs was always supportive of the Cowlitz, and the Cowlitz were always supportive of the Warm Springs. Howie had a slide that showed the IRS liaison there, the difference in the rules. They had rewritten this rule that essentially enabled them to do what they were doing, which was the taxation, improper taxation. And Howie had a slide with 2 statements up there, the old regulation and the new regulation. And Howie said, you changed the rules without consulting the tribes. And the young lady that was there as the liaison looked back at everyone and said, no, we didn't change the rules. It's still the same policy. So that was my turn to speak up. And I just simply said, you're telling us you didn't change the policy, but you changed the words. And at that point in time, there was a huge outbreak of laughter in the room. It did really turn the tone of the discussion. And it was not long after that, there was a real national movement among tribes to solve that problem. And that ended up with what's called a congressional bill that passed virtually unanimously under what's called unanimous consent. And it was a godsend for tribes. It's called the General Welfare Exclusion Act of 2014. It's where tribes can give money to their membership to help them wherever they are without the burden of taxation. In 1988, when the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act passed, any money going to members from the casinos had to be taxed. It's called per capita. We do not yet have per capita, but we do have GWE, General Welfare Exclusion Act distribution. The bill was passed in 2014. The Congress asked the IRS to come up with guidances, and it took them I think it took them almost 7 years to really start to work that issue. But when I became chairman, that was in the back of my mind. The GWE passed Congress. So we took the initiative and we moved forward with one of the earliest applications of GWE in the state of Washington. And we worked with our attorneys from DC, Nicole Elliott with Holland and Knight. She was a former IRS attorney. And so it was great. We had the right combination, and we worked with a finance company, Red W, out of Scottsdale, Arizona. We came up with a formula that for the wording of our GWE, which it is not taxable. We've done that now under my administration for, I believe, for nearly $40 million, somewhere in that category. When I was, before I retired, I worked in consultation with the Trump administration, and we didn't meet in DC, but we would do a Zoom meeting. And it was during COVID. And the administration was trying to work with the tribes on how to assist the tribes through the COVID relief package that was passed by Congress. So this was a true consultation process. It was great. And because of the GWE experience I had, I was always there to speak. And there was 400 tribal leaders on the phone. I would get in the queue. I would be number 1 or number 2 almost every time. And in the end, I'm sure we had some name recognition because the first amount of money that came down from COVID relief from the administration for us was $25 million. $25 million. There was more to come in the second package. And so I was so happy to see that come, and the Tribal Council ultimately decided to distribute that as GWE to the membership. And that, yes, there was concern. What are you going to do if the IRS comes and audits us and such? Well, here we are now, almost 4 years later, and that was the biggest tranche of funds, biggest amount of funds to go out to our membership in some time. I'm sure it was just an incredible benefit for a lot of folks out there during the COVID, because you might not be working, or you had to work from home, or maybe you lost your job. And so at that point in time, I was also dealing with the COVID matter, and so I was thinking about myself a little bit. I had served 12 years. I did have in past had a heart condition that has been corrected, but I did also need to have my knees replaced. I was at the end of the service life for my knees. I've always been a fitness nut. I ran 6 marathons and I biked all over the place, but in the end I destroyed my knees. So I retired to take care of some of my health needs and my family needs. And yes, I've got 2 brand new knees, and I'm feeling great. I'm biking, and I'm not running marathons, but I'm ready to run any marathon that might take to get the job done. And I want to thank you for listening today.